Hey friends, Sonia here with Ellie and Mac, and today we are going to talk about projectors and how you can use them in your sewing. Now this is a huge movement in the sewing world, and it's so exciting because it means that you don't have to print out your paper patterns anymore and tape them together. You can actually use a projector to project the pattern right down onto your sewing table. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about the basics of projectors, and again, this is going to be very generalized. Some of these things might or might not apply to whatever specific projector that you have, but we'll get more into that later. We are going to talk about using those projector patterns in your sewing practice, and also the patterns and their differences that Ellie and Mac is releasing, and what the difference is with a projector file versus your A0 or your printable pattern. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what's the difference? So when you print out your paper patterns on your home printer, you have to tape them all together. Or with an A0 size pattern, you're going to send it out to get printed typically, and then you get a very big sheet of paper. Now with the projector file, you are going to have it same thing on one big piece, kind of like an A0, but what Ellie and Mac has done to update all of these so that they're most efficient for you to use is a few things. One, your line weights are going to be heavier, so when it projects down onto your table, it should be easier to see. Same thing, the fonts can be bigger, just increased visibility. The next thing is your pattern pieces are all going to be shifted so they're going the same way. When you have A0 patterns, they are sometimes rotated so that you can print them all on one or two sheets of paper, and they all fit together on those couple of sheets. With a projector, we have rotated all of those so that the grain lines are going the same direction. So if you want to project them directly down onto your table and cut straight out of your fabric, you can do that without having to turn the fabric every time. And what do you need? So you're going to need a projector, obviously, and I will post a resource link down below that has a great group with so many awesome resources. It's called Projectors for Sewing. It's a group of thousands of people that have bought projectors and will put their feedback as far as how that projector works and help each other troubleshoot if you're having issues like calibration where your images are getting distorted, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But that is a fantastic resource. So after you watch this video and kind of get those, the initial introduction into projectors, you can head over to that group to maybe see which one you should get if you don't already have one. You're also going to need some cords. Most likely you're going to need HDMI cords. Mine takes a mini HDMI and then it converts into an HDMI on the other end to connect into my computer. The other cord that I needed to buy was a power cord, and it plugs into the USB in my computer because my projector runs off of a battery, and that battery doesn't last so long. So you can plan to buy your projector and then also a few accessories. Another thing is you're going to want to look at mounts. Now, the mount that I have is an Amazon mount. It was really inexpensive. I think it was $8, and you just screw it into the ceiling, and it's got a ball head on it so you can adjust your projector's direction. Now, that's really important because you have to have your projector perfectly level. Otherwise, if it's tilted, it's going to distort your image and your pattern pieces are going to be distorted. And then you may or may not end up needing some curtains for the room that you're using your projector in. So you're going to be most successful if you have your projection in a dark room, because the light filling your space is going to cancel out the light that the projector is putting down. So the darker it is, the better you're going to be able to see your projector. Now, I have a huge window in my room, and I will show you the projection in a minute. If I was doing this at night, it would be a lot more clear, but you can tell that you can see it during the day as well. And it also depends on the brightness of your projector. Okay, so say you are looking at investing in a projector if you don't already have one. Now, there's a few things that you want to take into consideration. One is going to be lumens, and we're not going to get really technical in this video, but you do want to be aware of how bright your projector is. So if you're looking for a very budget projector, it's not going to be as bright as something that you could use in a home theater, for example. Now for me, that's totally fine. I think my projector only has like 25 lumens, so you'll see what the contrast is on my sewing table and how that is gonna differ based on the projector that you get. Now, another thing that you wanna take into consideration is battery life. The projector that I have a cord running from the projector down to plug into my computer, and I actually ordered a 15-foot cord so that I could plug it into my computer because the batteries, it charges, but the battery just doesn't last very long. So I like to have that cord there in case I ever want to plug it in for power. So another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're looking at the capabilities of your projector is going to be your compatible file types. Now, the projector that I have has a tiny slot for a micro SD card in it, and I was really excited about that because I thought I could just copy all of my projector files over onto this tiny card, plug it in, and then I won't have to have a cord that runs all the way from the ceiling. Unfortunately, it didn't end up working out that way because my projector is not compatible with PDFs. So I do have a cord running from mine that connects from the projector down to my computer, and that's fine if you're willing to have that cord hanging off your ceiling. Now, another option is to get a projector that is compatible with some kind of a mirroring device. I've seen some people buy a projector and with it a Chromecast or an Amazon Fire Stick or something like that to plug it into the side of the projector into that USB slot, and then you can mirror from your computer to your projector and project that way. Now that's fantastic. It's definitely a cleaner look, but I wanted to use the projector I had already, so I didn't end up going with that. But if you're buying a new projector, definitely look at the capabilities if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, so for projector setup. Now, I talked to you about how I've got these cords hanging down. Now, what is going to make your environment the most successful for a projector is going to have a dark room. I have a huge window on this side of my room, so I made sure all the blinds are closed. If you have curtains, that works great. If you're like me and you sew typically after you put the kids to bed, then that's great too because it's going to be nighttime. You're not going to have to worry about light coming in. But yeah, the darkest room that you have is going to be the easiest to see your projector file. Now you can also go through on your projector and go to your settings, and on mine I bumped the contrast all the way up to 100. I bumped the brightness all the way up to 100. Now a lot of people wouldn't do this with a projector if you're using it for a movie, for example, but because we are working with line drawings, essentially I wasn't worried about it distorting the colors. I would rather have it as bright as possible. So that's what I did to hopefully increase that visibility. Now I'm making today's video in the middle of the day, so obviously there's quite a bit of light in my room, but I'll show you on the table kind of what that looks like. Now my projector doesn't have a remote, so I just keep a little ladder in here and, you know, scurry up and turn it on when I want to use it and then turn it off, and that's fine for me. A lot of projectors do have remotes now, and that will make it a lot easier that you don't have to get up onto the ceiling if that's where your projector is mounted. Your throw distance is another thing that you can look at. Now your throw distance is going to be how far your projector is able to throw the image. So you don't want if you have, 20-foot ceilings and you put a tiny little projector up there, it's not going to project the light and the image far enough down onto your table for that to be visible. So that's another thing to consider, is how far it can throw your image. And I have found that a great place to look for clarity and brightness and kind of some of those things are if you look on Amazon at the projector that you're considering getting and look in those reviews and see what other people say. Now the hardest part, in my opinion, of using the projector is getting it calibrated the first time. So once you get it mounted, you get it connected to your computer, then you turn it on, and I've got mine projecting down onto the table right here. You're going to use a grid to calibrate your image. Now the reason that you want to use a grid is so that you can tell when you have it projected, and this is going to vary based on how far your projector is from your table or from your floor. Some people have them project onto the floor, and that way you've got a bigger cutting area, so it just depends. but you are going to have to figure out what that exact percentage is of zoom on your file. When you open the file in Adobe, you have to calibrate to exactly what that percentage is to make sure that that little square, just like when you're printing out a pattern, is exactly 1 inch. So here's what the file looks like when you open it up in Adobe. Now I'm going to go ahead and unclick all of my sizes, and we're going to look at just the grid that's on here. So this is what you're going to use to calibrate and make sure that everything is the right size. Then we'll go ahead and turn the pattern back on. And right there, that percentage is what you're going to adjust. So I have my projection projecting down onto the table now with just the grid, no pattern pieces visible. And I put my grid ruler on top, and what you can see is those squares are quite a bit smaller than my inch grid squares on my ruler. So I need to zoom in on the projection on my computer. So I zoomed in from 27 to 29%, and we'll realign this here. And I can still tell that my grid that is being projected is smaller than the grid lines on my ruler, so I do need to zoom in a little bit more. So now I've zoomed into 31%, and keep in mind that this is specific to your projector and also the distance from your projector to your surface, but the magic number for mine is 31%. Now you can tell that this works because my vertical lines and my horizontal lines are all lined up correctly, and they're not spacing out further the further out they get. Now, if you do find that your lines are getting further apart, they could be partly the distortion that your projection is projecting down onto your surface. So we'll look at that on the computer. So when I plug in my HDMI cord, it automatically pops up the projector settings. And what works best for mine, and I definitely had to cycle through these a few times, is rather than going best for a projector, to go the ratio of 1600 by 900. Now that is what created the best ratio so that my grid matched up all the way without being distorted, and then I pumped the brightness up as high as it goes as well. So we're looking at the projection on the table now, and I've got two sizes selected to show you that if you want to lay your fabric out and cut directly on your fabric, you can see both sizes. So you can, if you're pretty confident in your grading, cut out while you're grading and not have to trace a pattern piece. Alternatively, you can use Swedish tracing paper or medical paper. I just got this roll on Amazon. It's pretty inexpensive, and the reason that I like to actually trace my pattern pieces when I'm using a projection is because then I can grade a little bit more carefully, and also if you have to make any height or full bust adjustments or swaybacks or anything like that, you're going to have to do that on your paper pattern piece rather than doing it directly on your fabric. So you can do either one. It's nice to have the pattern pieces, in my opinion, just so that you can make those adjustments, but it's completely your call. The other thing you'll have to do over the course of your cutting is to move your projection by scrolling on your computer so that you can get entire pattern pieces in your visible area. Now this is another reason why I typically like to use tracing paper to trace my pattern out, because I don't want to risk moving my fabric around and it continuing to shift or folding incorrectly. I also like to make the most out of my fabric and put those pieces as close together as possible and not have those big empty spaces in between, because I like to really Tetris my pattern pieces together and make the most of my fabric. Thanks for joining us today, friends. I hope you got some good information about using projectors with your sewing practice, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. See you in the next video.